Mother Nature, a spectacle to witness, a bringer of beauty, and a taker with force. Its behavior unpredictable, its impact immeasurable, its legacy unmatched. This event is Exhibit A. None like any other before and any other since. One that challenged our perspectives on things such as severe weather and America's aging power grid. So sit back and buckle up, because we're about to travel back in time. This is the Derecho of June 29th, 2012. The day of Friday, June 29, 2012, actually started off a little bit disruptive. Between 3:30 a.m. and 5:30 a.m., a thunderstorm complex rolled through north central and northeastern Maryland, clipping the northern part of Metro Baltimore. Other than that, everywhere else in the state was relatively quiet. What would then follow is a day of heat and humidity as temperatures skyrocketed throughout the late morning and early afternoon. And this wasn't your typical hot summer day. This was one for the record books. Look at these recordings here. BWI Airport got the 103, downtown the Science Center got the 106, even Salisbury and most of the Eastern Shore was baking. The heat took no prisoners from Deep Creek Lake to the Atlantic coastline. Combine the heat with the high dew points and humidity levels, the air felt like a split pea soup. Us here in Maryland and the Mid-Atlantic were not alone. Just about everyone in the lower 48 was dealing with the same conditions. Just look at this map here, for example. 109 in Nashville, 104 in Atlanta, 106 in St. Louis. This was essentially a coast-to-coast pressure cooker. All this heat and humidity creates instability in the atmosphere. And speaking of instability, another thing to mention, the instability and potential energy levels were off the charts on this day. This is a very important component. To kind of dumb it down for you, instability in the atmosphere to thunderstorms are what oxygen is to humans. Without it, thunderstorms can't develop, sustain, or maintain its strength. While researching this event, there was some surprising and rather concerning information that I found based on some of the Storm Prediction Center's products, such as the mesoscale discussions and the risk of outlooks for the day. Most of the forecasts during the early hours did not indicate a serious concern for severe storm development, nor that any storms that do develop in the Mid-Atlantic and Ohio Valley would be too serious. This much instability and energy in the atmosphere, and for this distance, could not only mean the development of a thunderstorm, but even more importantly, the rare longevity and sustainability of one. This behemoth would be Exhibit A. In the late morning hours, a storm popped up in eastern Iowa, then it rolled through northern Illinois, then grew and developed, especially after the noon hour. The storm, now developing into a derecho, rolled into northern and eastern Indiana. It would hit its first major population center, Fort Wayne. Fort Wayne's airport recorded a wind gust of 91 miles per hour, good enough for highest recorded wind gust during the storm's life cycle. Then it barreled through most of Ohio, impacting metropolitan areas like Toledo, Dayton, Columbus, and Cincinnati, with 70 to 80 mile per hour winds, jackknifing semis, blowing roofs off buildings, and damaging a stage set in Salina. The next big target, West Virginia, impacting cities like Huntington and Charleston. Numerous trees would be knocked down statewide, 2 of those cases resulting in injuries. Pittsburgh and southwestern Pennsylvania were being dealt the next blow. At about the same time and just after, much of Virginia was being hit, with numerous injuries and 7 fatalities based on storm reports from the Storm Prediction Center. After that, it was Maryland's turn to face the music, or the thunder, if you will. At about 8:30, the complex of severe storms started to roll into western Maryland. Oakland was the first substantial population center impacted here in Maryland. Into the 9 o'clock hour, it raged on, racing through cities like Cumberland and Hagerstown. Into the 10 o'clock hour, Frederick, Westminster, and West Central Maryland were all being impacted. Now, during these last 90 minutes, a dilemma was being created for Baltimore and Washington, D.C. to face. During this time, the storm moved over the well-known Appalachian Mountains, specifically portions of it like the Allegheny and Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. These mountains are well known for weakening severe thunderstorm systems before moving into central Maryland and the DMV. In fact, some expected the Appalachians to weaken these storms, like how they always do. But man, oh man, Mother Nature really had quite the thing cooking for us that even The Rock couldn't beat. As soon as the storms went past the Blue Ridge Mountains, it quickly re-intensified. This meant big trouble for those still in the path, including two major metropolitan areas. Around 10:30 p.m., it rolled into the DMV. 11 o'clock, Central Maryland, Metro Baltimore, and Southern Maryland were being dealt 60 to 75 mile-per-hour winds. 11:30, the Eastern Shore and the Delmarva counties were being impacted. By the time 1 a.m. came around, it was out of Maryland, off the coast, and a thing of the past. And with that, 12 hours of some of the most powerful storms seen in recent memory were capped off. 700 miles of severe weather across 10 states. 22 lives lost across 7 of the states impacted. Almost 1,200 wind-related storm reports nationwide, 132 of them here in Maryland. Nearly 1,300 overall storm reports nationwide, close to 1,200 in the 10 states impacted. The Old Line State had 138. Here are the storm reports by county. Caroline and Carroll County, you're the lucky ones if there's even one in this situation, because you had no reports. Yay? Question mark? The land of blue crabs also accounted for 12% of all reports along this path. Only Virginia and Ohio accounted for more reports. Wind was the commanding element, as all wind-related report categories accounted for about 96% of all reports along the Derecho's path. In all, this was a rare event. Now, a few more tidbits to sum up real quickly. When you have a windstorm like this, you're going to have power outages. 4 million people across the country on this day did have power knocked out because of this storm. The average outage lasted a little bit more than a day and a half per customer, and at some point in the 9 days that followed, over 750,000 people lost power. This turned out to be really bad timing, as the storm, even though it was very strong and very violent, it wasn't even a cold front. So the next 9 days in Baltimore, we did have temperatures over 90 degrees, 8 of them being at or above 95, and 3 of them eclipsing triple digits. This wasn't just us either. Fort Wayne, which we mentioned earlier, was in the midst of a 22-day stretch where they had temperatures of 90 degrees or higher. You put 2 and 2 together, you get an outcome that's quite possibly worse than the storm itself. 34 more people died due to the extreme heat in the 10 states impacted, raising the total death toll to 56.
The strong winds are now moving through Dublin, moving into Worthington. So if you're in Worthington, you should be in your shelter. I would go to your tornado shelter just to be on the safe side with this.
That's a Category 1 hurricane. Straight line winds. The kind of damage we saw over a huge area was even probably more extensive than a hurricane would even cause.
There was an explosion that's arcing like crazy, and we can see fire coming up all around.
The wind came in hurricane force, announced Friday night across the mid-Atlantic by lightning that some described as an artillery barrage.
Doug,
Yes, sir.
let me ask you something. You showed the temperatures for the next several days a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah.
All in the 90s. Are we in an unusual pattern here? And is this a harbinger of what we can expect through the summer, or does it mean anything at all like that?
I really don't think it means anything, Jim. One thing that this does say, and I was on the radio today talking with some of the folks from WMZQ, and they said, well, Doug, is this global warming, and what's going on? If we did not have global warming, we wouldn't see this. I really believe that. Are we in an unusual pattern? Yes. Does this kind of pattern happen? Yes, it does. Is this an unusual pattern to see temperatures this high? When you're talking about all-time record heat, it is fairly unusual.